Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 5, Episode 8, The Barber. Hello everyone. I am back after taking a week off. Last week I went to San Francisco, and in addition to spending time with one of my oldest friends, I got to cross off a bucket list item, which was to see the band New Order in concert. And it was pretty amazing. I went to San Francisco because, unfortunately, New Order didn't come to Denver. It was a very limited North American tour, but when I saw the dates, I said, well, I'm traveling to one of these cities because it's, like I said, been a bucket list item. The trifecta of new wave bands for me when I was growing up was Depeche Mode, Erasure, and New Order. I've seen Erasure a few times. I've seen Depeche Mode many times. And I had never seen New Order. They don't really tour very much. So, yeah, I was bound and determined to see them on this tour. In fact, they were supposed to come in 2020, but I think you all know what happened in 2020. So this has been a long time coming, this sort of anticipation to see them live. And well, that happened last week, and it was pretty amazing. They were co-headlining with the Pet Shop Boys, and I enjoy some Pet Shop Boys songs, but they're not in my top bands, but they were a pleasure to see. These the members of these bands are up there. They're I think pushing 60, if not already in their 60s. So it's there's a lot of production and like visual effects going on, a lot of laser lights during the New Order portion of the concert. Pet Shop Boys had elaborate sets and costumes, so they do their best. I mean, they're not running around the stage like well, I mean, Depeche Mode has a great front man in Dave Gahan, but they're, that's not who they are. So it was really, really cool to see how they really made it visually entertaining, because they're not going to be like these front men that just kind of entertain the crowd with their presence and their swagger. But so it was really good. The sound was amazing. I wasn't sure, how New Order would sound, but they sounded awesome. There was a snafu, and I can't dwell on it too much because it was an amazing show. I saw a lot of my favorite songs, but because of a miscommunication about when New Order was going on, I missed their opening song, which is literally my favorite song, not only of New Order's, but maybe of all time. It's a song called Regret. Look it up. I highly recommend it if you're into this genre of music. They opened with it, and we got there apparently late, even though the set time said 7:30. They went on at 7. It was a last-minute change, and oh my gosh. I am really heartbroken about it, but I can't dwell on it too much because I saw a ton of other songs that I love. But if I'm being completely honest, Regret is the one song I wanted to hear more than any of them. Okay, I can't dwell on it too much. I'm not going to be negative about it because, again, it was a great experience. And I got to catch up with one of my oldest friends, and it was, that's always fun. Who doesn't love to chat with an old friend and spend time with them? And they bought a new house in San Francisco, so it was great to see their awesome, like, old Victorian house that was built in 1906, but actually could be older because of the fire of 1906, and everything was rebuilt. Just so cool. Such a historic city. So I really enjoyed spending time with her and her family. In other news, this is just all about new wave bands. Depeche Mode, they are coming on tour next year. So I just bought tickets. They are not coming to Denver. Again, another very limited North American tour. But I do not miss Depeche Mode when they come to town. If they're on tour, I am going to see them. I make it happen. I have seen them on every single tour since 1993, the Songs of Faith and Devotion tour. And I'm devotional. What can I say? Depeche Mode pun. But I'm thinking, because they unfortunately lost one of the band members this past year, Andrew Fletcher, one of the original founding members of Depeche Mode, passed away pretty suddenly. And so Dave and Martin, the other remaining members, are going to be doing this tour. They're coming out with a new album. And I don't know if they've been explicit about it, but it's meant, or it's assumed to be kind of a farewell tour. And, well, I can't miss that. And so, yeah, next year I will be seeing Depeche Mode in San Jose. I'm so excited. California, LA especially, but California as a state has always been sort of like the hub of Depeche Mode fans, like the biggest Depeche Mode fans in the United States. So I'm really excited to see Depeche Mode in California because I think it's just going to be a different caliber of fan, and it's going to be really, really fun. And yeah, I'm so excited. I saw them for the first time in 1993, and I might be seeing them for the last time in 2023. It's just something kind of poetic about that. All right, well, enough about my new wave band obsessions, and let's get into this episode. The synopsis for The Barber is as follows. After a bad haircut, Jerry decides to see another barber behind his usual barber's back. Newman betrays Jerry's secret, and Jerry gets revenge by shaving him bald. Elaine coordinates a charity bachelor auction where Kramer wreaks havoc. George, unsure whether he was hired for a job, decides to start showing up to an empty office and act like he belongs there. This episode was written by Andy Robin. Okay, we start out the episode with George being interviewed for a job. And the interviewer, who's named Mr. Tuttle, seems to really like George. He's very impressed that George is so sharp and that he doesn't seem to need every little thing explained to him. And George is doing his thing, lying and really talking himself up. And then Mr. Tuttle starts saying, we'd love to hire you. Of course. But he never finishes the sentence, and he dismisses George due to a phone call. Next, we're at Monk's. George is telling Jerry and Elaine about that last unfinished sentence. He doesn't know what the heck the guy was going to say. They all try to guess what the end of the sentence may have been, checking with his associates, the board of directors has been indicted, or, as Jerry says, sodomy is a prerequisite. Elaine suggests just call the guy, but George says he can't since he went on and on about how he understands everything immediately. So Jerry says, so if you call, you may lose the job, but if you don't call, you may have the job, but you'll never know it. Jerry asks, what type of company is it? Rest Stop Supply. Oh, Elaine says, good for you. I love that moment. It's like just oddly sweet. Rest Stop Supply is nothing exciting, but they act so excited for George. It's a very rare, sweet moment in these relationships. Kramer enters. He's very proud of his haircut. Jerry asks if he went to Gino. Of course, he wouldn't let that butcher cut his hair. Elaine asks, what butcher? This guy named Enzo, he's the guy that cuts Jerry's hair. And Jerry says, look, I've been going to him for 12 years. I can't switch now. It would hurt his feelings. Elaine agrees. Jerry never gets good haircuts. Kramer says he could get one today. Enzo has the day off. Elaine says, yes, please get one to look good for that bachelor auction. She explains to Kramer that it's an auction for dates to raise money for charity. Kramer, he's so offended. How could you not ask me to do this, Elaine? I could raise enough money to cure polio. I believe polio has been cured for some time. Polio? Kramer sees George is all dressed up and asks how his job interview went. Good. Of course. My take on this scene, Elaine's really just more supporting here. There's not much for her to do, kind of foreshadowing for this entire episode. Wah, wah. I do think she's about to break after Kramer repeats polio. As she's asking Jerry, would you go? You need a haircut. It looks very much like the Julia Louis-Dreyfus about to break face. But she kept it together. Good job, Julia. All right, next we're at Enzo's barber shop. Jerry arrives, but oops, Enzo is there. Enzo offers to take care of him, even though it's his day off. You're so loyal, he tells Jerry. And Jerry says, no. If it's your day off, whatever, it takes 10 minutes. And Enzo basically pushes him into the chair. Meanwhile, the guy in the next chair, Gino's chair, is beside himself. It's the best haircut he's ever had. Then we cut to Jerry in his apartment. with a terrible haircut. George is laughing at him. He massacred you. You look like you're 5 years old. Kramer enters. Oh, no way my Gino did that. Jerry says, yeah, Enzo was in the shop. So what? Kramer insists he will call Gino and get this hair fixed up for him. And Jerry says, no, you don't do that. Don't get involved. Fine. You're crazy. George informs Jerry of his plan about that job he's not sure he got. He says, I show up. You know, the guy's on vacation. By the time he gets back, I'll be ensconced in the office. And of course, George isn't dismayed by the fact that the worst that could happen here is him being humiliated and walking out with his tail between his legs, all shameful. I like how Jerry's like, of course, I forgot who I was dealing with. All right, next we are at the job, Sanilac offices. George arrives so enthusiastically, saying good morning to literally everyone, probably a couple times to each person. Good morning, good morning, good morning. The receptionist is kind of confused. She wasn't aware anyone was starting work that day. The actress who plays this receptionist, Clarice, is played by Peggy Etra. Now, in researching her, I found it really interesting to learn that Peggy is mostly known to be a puppeteer in Hollywood and has worked a ton in that capacity, even doing puppet improv shows as a cast member of the Groundlings. I just think that's so cool. She doesn't really get much in this episode, so I can't really comment. I think she's perfectly fine, but I was just a little fascinated by that background. A puppeteer, how cool. And I just wanted to explain here for any new listeners who might be confused why I always give the background of the actresses. I mean, this is an Elaine Bennis podcast, but I also like to highlight every actress that appears on the show. You know, it's a very male-dominated show. And just as an actress myself, I like to highlight all the females that contributed to Seinfeld. And that is why every time in every episode, I just kind of give a little bit of background on every actress that appears. So Clarice, the receptionist, calls Mike over and he welcomes George aboard. He wasn't even aware that Mr. Tuttle was done interviewing people. And he says, well, we have two offices, big or small. Let's ask Jack. Oh, no, leave Jack alone, George says. He'll take the small office. He loves to be nestled. Mike points him in the direction and then grabs the Penske file for him. George enters his office, leafs through the file a bit, and then we see the clock sort of tick through to 5 p.m., and then George leaves. Done with the day. Next, we're back at Monk's. Jerry and George are eating at a booth, and Jerry is sporting a baseball cap to hide his haircut. George is telling Jerry how much he's enjoying working at Sanilac. You know, really thinks his coworkers are taking to him. The day before, there was a little party for Grace, and as he's describing the party, we see it transpire silently, kind of go back in this little dream scene, and we see him interrupt Mike to make a speech. And these other employees, you can literally see them going, who is that guy? It's pretty funny. He mentions Tuttle will be back on Monday. Uh-oh. Elaine enters. She asks Jerry, why are you wearing a hat? I got a haircut. She asks to see, and he keeps refusing. Come on. Finally, he takes it off, and we get a huge Elaine laugh. George starts laughing, too. They are both enjoying this together. And Jerry says, well, you know, you can forget about me going to that bachelor auction. She stops laughing immediately. No, Jerry, you have to go. And George says, you know, Elaine, I wish I could help you out, but I'm working that day. Yeah, too bad. My take on this scene, Jerry's haircut reveal to Elaine is so great because we get some top-notch JLD laugh acting here. I've said before how I think she is an immensely talented laugh actor. It's not an easy thing to do, to laugh convincingly. They have a whole scene about it in a previous episode. I mean, it's so good, in fact, that I do wonder if some of it is real laughing, JLD really laughing. But you know what? She's such a fantastic actress in general. But again, her laugh acting can't be matched. So I believe this is all acting. But yeah, just really well done. And then I love how she and George are in this together, this laughing moment. Just so much joy laughing at Jerry. You can see that's part of why it's so enjoyable for them. And there's a little moment where she like kind of elbows George like, did you see it? Like, it's so funny. Again, the George and Elaine relationship has so many layers. It's so entertaining to watch. They're literally laughing together, and then half a second later, she's rolling her eyes at Jerry about George and his suggestion that he could do the bachelor auction if he weren't working. So it's like, that's the relationship. They're enjoying this moment together for like at least 20 seconds, and then instantly it changes when he says his little comment. She looks at Jerry going like, oh my God, this guy. So well done. All right, next we're back at Enzo's, the barber shop. Gino is shaving Kramer, and Kramer's telling Gino about Jerry's haircut. It's the worst he's ever had. You gotta fix it. Gino says, I will, but we have to keep it a secret. Enzo is a little crazy. He's not sure what he'll do if he finds out. Then Enzo enters, so they have to change the subject. Gino starts talking about Edward Scissorhands. Oof, again with the Edward Scissorhand. Enzo is not a fan at all. Gino says it's beautiful. I would love to be like Edward Scissorhands. And Enzo asks, did you ever think about what you're going to do on the toilet? What are you going to do on the toilet? Kramer says he'd love to have shoehorn hands. Oh, that just brings back a memory of my dad. My dad used a shoehorn. I'm just like, do people use them anymore these days? I don't know. I feel like they probably design shoes so that you don't need shoehorns. But like, I distinctly remember my dad had to wear a suit. He worked for the Federal Reserve Bank. And so he wore a suit every day to work. And every morning he would have to use a shoehorn to get those like really stiff patent leather kind of shoes he used to wear, his office shoes. Anyway, when he said shoehorn, I remembered my dad. All right, next we are at Monk's. Jerry, Elaine, and George are still at the booth. And Kramer enters and tells Jerry he's arranged the whole thing. Gino is going to fix the haircut. Oh, Elaine's excited. Okay, good. Now this means you can go to the bachelor auction. And Jerry tries to say, well, yeah, but how are we going to do it? Kramer cuts him off. No buts. His apartment, 8 o'clock tonight. Elaine asks, can he fix it? I don't know. Next, we're at Gino's apartment. Gino is complimenting Jerry on his beautiful head of hair. Thanks. Enzo hasn't said that in a long time. They're obviously trying to kind of parallel this with someone having an affair, with someone who gives them, more compliments than maybe their partner. So I think it's pretty funny the way they do that. Someone buzzes. It's your Uncle Enzo. Oh, no. Gino tells Jerry to hide, and he cleans up as Enzo arrives. Enzo's there to apologize. He rented Edward Scissorhands, and Johnny Depp made him cry. This really excites Gino. Then Enzo finds some stray hairs on the ground. Asks Gino, you're doing haircuts in the apartment? No, Gino says, a pizza man was here. He's going bald. Maybe some of his hair fell out. And we see Enzo hold up the hair. Looks very familiar. Next, we're at Jerry's apartment. Jerry is telling Kramer about how Gino was so good for the 1 minute he worked on him. He's so excited. But that Enzo picked up some of his hair. I think he knew. Kramer is like, there's no way he could know. You're just being paranoid. Elaine enters. She's disappointed. What happened? It looks exactly the same. Well, he says we almost got caught. Jerry, the auction is in a few hours. Jerry offers up the K-Man. Elaine thinks for a second. Well, you could still go. Kramer says, are you kidding? He's grotesque. He's repugnant. Elaine, last-ditch effort, tries to mess around with Jerry's hair and makes it look worse. She just kind of pulls it down into these really terrible bangs. She turns to Kramer. What would you wear? Whatever it takes. My take on this scene, really not much to Elaine's part here. Big surprise. But I just wanted to note that this is the second time Jerry's appearance has screwed Elaine over with a charity event she organized. Last time it was with Goodwill and the puffy shirt. And I can't help but wonder, is she going to get fired from the committee again because of what happens with Kramer? So basically twice now we've seen Jerry's inability to be confrontational totally screw over Elaine and her charity efforts. And I'm going to get into this a little bit later when I cover the notes about nothing, but this entire bachelor auction storyline was a late change in the script. And I'm thinking perhaps that's why they sort of recycled this whole Elaine in charge of a charity thing, but more on that later. Next, we are at Enzo's, and Enzo is giving Newman a haircut. Gino's sweeping behind them. Enzo is going on and on about how Newman is so loyal and that he doesn't mind if someone's funny, but he doesn't like the funny business. Gino says, you know what, I have to go out for a little bit. After he leaves, Enzo asks Newman, well, you do like the haircut? That's all right. It's a bit crooked. I do like that that's Newman's response, because he's kind of saying to Enzo, when I find a barber, I stick with them. But even he has to admit, like, you're not that great. Enzo then offers him free haircuts in exchange for a sample of Jerry's hair. Well, Newman accepts, but only after he negotiates for more free haircuts and a comb. All right, next we're at George's office. It's another day of George doing nothing in his small office. The secretary buzzes and says that Mr. Penske is there to see him. Of the Penske file? Well, this guy comes in hot and asks to see his file, and he's impressed by George's accordion folder organizing, and he thinks he should come work for Penske. But you are aware. Then there's a buzz from Clarice. Mr. Penske's car is being towed. Damn this city! Penske exits, and George calls after him. I am aware! I am aware! All right, next we're at Jerry's apartment. Gino is there. He's telling Jerry that Enzo knows he's obsessing over that hair. Newman buzzes. He was there in the shop with Enzo. Jerry tells him to go hide, go out the fire escape, and he lets Newman in. Newman asks to use Jerry's bathroom. Well, of course, Jerry's like, gross, no. He resists, but he finally says yes and tells him to flush twice. Then we see Newman in the bathroom looking for hair, but Jerry is such a clean person he cannot find any. So Newman exits and asks if he can watch Edward Scissorhands with Jerry. It's one of his favorite movies. But it's just a way for him to cut some of Jerry's hair off with the scissors he found in the bathroom. Finally, he's able to snip some off, and he leaves giggling away. Then we have a short scene of Newman delivering the sample to Enzo. Enzo compares it to the hair from Gino's apartment and gets very upset, and he leaves to exact vengeance, or something Italian vendetta. I can't say it. Next, we are at the bachelor auction. Elaine is at the podium auctioning off a handsome Harvard graduate for $1,000. Everyone applauds, and Elaine has to move on to the next bachelor. He's number 124 on your program. He's a high school graduate. Equivalency, a high school equivalency program graduate. He's self-employed, 6'3", 190 pounds. He likes fruit, and he just got a haircut. Kramer, this whole time, has been walking up and down the runway, doing all sorts of weird moves and dancing, and then he falls off the stage. Elaine is frustrated and starts the bidding at $5. My take on this scene, this is one of my favorite scenes of this series, and I wish it had more to do with JLD's performance, but it's because of Michael Richards' physical comedy here. Oh my God, all those moves on that runway catwalk or whatever. And then the fall off the stage. First he falls off the edge onto a table and then off of the table. It's just such incredible physical comedy. And that's not to say that JLD doesn't do a great job with her performance. I love her shift in emotion. She's so excited about that Harvard guy, and, you can see how pleased she is, raising $1,000 for him. And then you see it in her face. You hear it in her voice when she has to move on to Kramer. It's like this almost apologetic tone. And then when he corrects her with an equivalency. Oh, my God. Oh, high school equivalency program graduate. That gets me every time. Very, very funny. Now, Kramer is all the comedy here with the physical stuff he has to do, but he gets great support in JLD's performance as well. All right, next we are at Jerry's apartment. Jerry and Gino are watching Edward Scissorhands together. And Jerry doesn't get it. What, is he supposed to be a superhero? Gino turns to him, gives him a look. I'm just asking. There's a knock on the door. It's Enzo. Oh my gosh. Gino runs to the bedroom. Jerry opens the door. Enzo accuses him of being at Gino's apartment. Don't lie, he says. I got a sample of your hair. Newman. Gino enters, tells Jerry not to lie. Yes, it's true. And Enzo's going to kill the both of yous. But then Enzo and Gino get distracted by all the scissor sounds from Edward Scissorhands that's still playing on Jerry's TV. All right, next we're at George's office. I just want to say we're at scene 17 in this episode. There's so many things jam-packed in this episode. Back in George's office, Tuttle enters. Mr. Tuttle's back, and he enters to see George fully asleep at his desk. He closes the door, and George awakens, and he tells George, "Oh, I'm surprised to see you in the smaller office. Thought he'd take the big one. Guess he wasn't clear about that when he hired him." So, it turns out George was actually hired. And Tuttle discovers he hasn't done a thing with the Penske file and begins to wonder if he understands anything at all. Well, George doesn't like his tone, and he sort of flexes that Penske is interested in him and wants him to work for him. "You're not Penske material." Well, George says, "We'll just see about that," and quits. A-ta-ta, a-ta-tel. Next, we are at Jerry's and then Enzo's. There's a quick shot of Enzo and Gino crying at Edward Scissorhands. And then at Enzo's, Newman is fulfilling his dream that he talked about in an earlier scene about becoming a barber. He's cutting a man's hair. Can't believe he's doing that, but apparently I don't think he can do any worse than Enzo. When Jerry enters, and Newman knows he's in trouble. And then we see from Jerry's point of view him slowly walking over to Newman with the clippers on. We have a couple tag scenes here. There's a tag scene with George at Penske, and Mr. Penske apologizes, says, "Sorry, but the board of directors have been indicted, him included, and there's no way they can do any business until the investigation has been concluded, and so obviously they'd have no use for him." And then his secretary buzzes to say George's car is being towed. And all that dramatic music that's been going on the whole episode, we get this kind of ending, da-da! And we have George do this like flourish with his hand. And then there's an extra tag at the very end after the credits where Newman has a shaved head and he's on the phone with Kramer and says he won't be going out for a while. All right, I'm going to take a quick break and I will see you on the other side. Oh, he's kind of cute. I can never tell, though, on these apps. Why do I even bother? I'm so sick of wasting my time. If you had a nickel for every bad experience you've had on a dating app, you'd probably have, like, a little bit more disposable income, right? But who knows how much? Well, why don't you find out? Introducing WeBay, a new dating app where we help you find your bae. At WeBay, you put yourself up to the highest bidder for a date. Similar to eBay, at WeBay, you post the offer of a date complete with a description, up to 15 photos, a starting bid, and length of auction. I'd been on every dating app out there, and I swear I thought I'd be alone for the rest of my life. But after I signed up for WeBay, I'm still single, but at least I raised enough money to buy the best vibrator on the market. With WeBay, you are in control of your worth. But remember, false advertising can result in bad reviews. Don't post doctored photos or fabricate the condition of the product, because your disappointed date will be able to let WeBay users know if you aren't what you advertised. And if you're in the market for a date, you can search up the perfect mate on WeBay. Narrow your search using our 400 filters that include appearance, education, allergies, favorite cities, and even pet peeves. I had money to spend, and I needed a date. But I'm picky. That's probably why I was single for so long. But I targeted my search on WeBay and ended up finding the woman of my dreams. Under 5'2", hates traffic, loves crown molding, and is lactose intolerant. Best $107 I've ever spent. Visit WeBay now at www.webay.ebay.date to buy or sell some romance. Who says you can't make some money while trying to find love? WeBay. Set a rate for your date. WeBay does not promote any sort of prostitution or sex favors for money unless that's what you want, in which case that needs to be explicit in your auction description. And we're back. So in the notes about nothing, they explain how this bachelor auction storyline was a last-minute change to Elaine's plot, which originally involved romance and a barber chair. So they really laid this out in the notes about nothing. So I'm going to tell you guys what they had originally slated for Elaine's plot here. There was an elaborate story which involved Elaine in the entire barbershop plot. So she was involved in all the Enzo and Gino stuff. So originally, Enzo and Gino were brothers, and their third brother, hence the sign, if you noticed, in the barbershop, you see the sign that's on the set, not the outside sign that says Enzo's, but the sign that's on the window says Three Brothers Barbershop. So there was a third brother, Aldo, who died a long time ago, but they kept his chair. Enzo tells Elaine that Aldo was a skilled barber, but got caught up in the wrong crowd. He ended up drinking the blue liquid used to clean the combs, or as Jerry put it, he committed barbicide. That's from his act. I remember it. Over Gino's protests, Enzo agrees to sell Elaine Aldo's chair. Apparently, Elaine has always wanted a barber chair. That's a dream that Elaine apparently had. The problem started with Aldo's son, Francisco, who shows up to work at the shop. And he's a ladies' man. And Francisco decides to win Elaine's heart and take back the chair because he doesn't want his father's chair to be sold. But instead, he falls in love with Elaine's thick, lustrous hair. And though the Mangianeros have never touched a woman's hair, he decides to give her a haircut. Enzo and Gino's fight over Jerry's haircut ends when Francisco enters with Elaine and announces that he's going to forsake his barber birthright and become a beautician instead. So apparently that was the original plot for Elaine. And the thought was the script seemed to lean a little bit too heavily on the guest actors, so they made the following revisions. Aldo and Francisco vanished. No third brother, no third brother's son. Enzo became Gino's uncle, and the Bachelor storyline was added. I can't even fathom that other storyline. It just seems so, again, like this whole episode's overdramatic. You know, they changed the music. There was none of the usual Seinfeld stings, like there was none of that. And it's all replaced with this very dramatic sort of over the top music. And so I guess that would kind of go along with that. But oh my gosh, it just sounds so convoluted. Also, it's like, oh, Aldo's chair. And then all of a sudden we find out Elaine wants a barber chair. Like, what? It just seemed really, really like a big stretch just to get some of this overdramatic stuff in there. But I'm glad they changed the storyline. But I also think Elaine's plot is so weak here that I can feel the last minute change in just the weakness of her plot. So anyway, at least we get an explanation about why it is. And, you know, unfortunately, JLD gets screwed with the last minute change, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Let's move on to Contributor Corner. Greg sent in some thoughts this week. He says, I always forget this episode exists, and then when I randomly see it every few years, I remember why I don't love it. It's just a bunch of meh storylines. It's very Jerry-centric, which is never good. George's storyline is a typical George in a new job fair, but Elaine and Kramer are just kind of on the back burners. The Jerry Barber thing is a dumb setup. There are at least 50 barbershops on the Upper West Side alone. Why do you have to go to a different barber at the same barbershop? Once again, your New York knowledge comes in handy here, Greg. I agree. The setup's kind of stupid. Just go to a different barbershop. And we do hear Jerry say, like, well, he's on the corner. I'd have to pass him every day. It's like, well, I don't know. It just doesn't seem. I think it's very realistic and relatable to have this weird, like, breakup thing with someone who provides this type of service, like, a haircut, or maybe for ladies, whoever you go to for your facials or your skincare and stuff like that. So yeah, these are weird relationships where you do have to break up with someone, or you can just ghost them. But then it gets awkward if you do run into them. So I like the relatability of that setup. But to your point, Greg, going to the same barbershop but switching, like that just seems cruel. Just find another one of the 50, like you said, on the Upper West Side. Greg's next thought, are bachelor auctions a thing? I swear this was a common plot a lot in the 80s and 90s sitcoms, most memorably in Saved by the Bell. But do they actually exist? I have no idea, and I hope they don't. Now that you say the Saved by the Bell thing, I do vaguely remember. I watched Saved by the Bell. I do vaguely remember this, and I think it involved AC Slater, of course, maybe doing like a dance move to try and get the bidding up. That's, I would bet like $1,000 on that because that was usually what AC Slater did. So, yeah, I don't know if they exist. I hope they don't. And I think you're right. This was a thing. Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, if they did exist, hopefully they went by the wayside in the new millennium. Greg's next thought. Elaine's best moment is when she and George are cracking up at Jerry's haircut. And truthfully, the haircut is no worse than the normal poofy coif. But I do enjoy a George and Elaine laughing at Jerry's expense moment. Yes, that's what that moment's all about for sure. And I agree. I know it's ridiculous that like the way the hair is styled, but I'm like all about this shorter haircut though, because that poofiness, it just didn't work for me. Greg goes on to say, ultimately JLD is just completely wasted in this one. I think she said the phrase bachelor auction 173 times, and that was about it. I like when she's introducing Kramer at the auction, but even that is overshadowed by Kramer's goofy catwalking. At one point, she says, our next bachelor is number 124 in your program. 124? How many men are in this thing? If they were going to do this bachelor auction as a plot, it should have been more a focus with Elaine meeting all these guys that potentially she herself may want to date. It's just out of nowhere she's doing this for no real reason than to give her something to do. Ooh, I like a lot of what you said there, Greg. So, like I said just before with the notes about nothing information, yes, this was just giving her something to do because, again, they changed that entire plot at the last minute. So that's why it reeks of that. But yes, Elaine meeting a bunch of bachelors at this charity auction and her trying to maybe get one for free. Like that's a story. That's a show. That would have been great. And we would have been able to see JLD a lot more in this episode. It would have been so much more comedy for her. See, sometimes, Greg, you bring up these things and now I'm like, I can't let this go. Like, I want to take the DeLorean and go back in time and make that happen because that would have been an amazing episode. And Greg's last thought. Yeah, I don't like this episode. It's never a good sign when Newman is funnier than anyone else. Agreed, Greg. I will get more into my agreement thoughts in a little bit. But thank you so much for contributing yet again, Greg. We always love your thoughts. And if you would like to be a contributor to Hot and Heavy, please email me at elainepodcast@gmail.com. That's elainepodcast@gmail.com. All right, moving on to my favorite Elaine moments. It's the bachelor auction. Just JLD's whole vibe is so well done. She's embarrassed and annoyed. And when Kramer falls off the stage, you just see her mortified, but also not surprised. I love her performance in that scene, start to finish. To Greg's point, yes, it's overshadowed by Michael Richards and all his physical comedy, but as someone who really does hone in on everything JLD does as Elaine, I really appreciate everything she brings to that scene as well. And my final notes. We get another episode that's pretty broad with the comedy. And no, I don't mean broad in the sense of female because Elaine gets shit, as we've talked about. And, after learning about that last minute plot change for her, I can see why she barely gets anything. But if only the change in the script could have still included a plot that gave her some quality comedy. Ugh. So just like Elaine, JLD got the shaft here because of a last-minute alteration to the plan. The script was Jerry's bad haircut, and this bachelor auction plot was Kramer falling off the stage, basically. And with that analogy, I think that's all I can say about The Barber. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.